and welcome to another episode of Good Faith Gaming. Today I'm talking about video game regrets. Do you have any regrets in your video game past, such as trading in games you wish you didn't, or maybe lending them out to someone who you didn't get them back from? Let me know down in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. So today I'm going to start with the infamous storage locker break-in that happened to me when I was in college. I'm sure this is not a unique experience to me, but when I went to college, I had a lot of stuff at my parents' house that I didn't want to bring with me, and they didn't want it in the house anymore. So we rented a storage locker to put a lot of my games and stuff in there. Now, obviously, in retrospect, I wish I didn't do that because the locker got broken into, and you could tell that the people had gone through everything in there, but didn't take anything except for my video game box. Now, what was in there, it's kind of hard for me to know now because I don't have it to look at. But the crown jewel of my collection was in there, and that was a in-box with booklet and everything version of Chrono Trigger. Now, that was the version I had gotten in like 1996, 1997 that I had played a million times. And honestly, it was the crown jewel of my collection, and I wish I had another copy that was in that good of shape today. But it's so expensive that I doubt I'm ever going to buy it. And of course, Square isn't ever going to re-release it for some reason either. Besides that, I think my GameCube collection was taken. I think my PlayStation 1 and 2 collections were taken. And my Genesis and SNES and NES collections, like all those were wiped out in the infamous storage locker heist. So if I could go back in time, I obviously wouldn't put my valuables like that in there. I thought they were safe, but they weren't. And you know how in Persona 5, how you go into people's psyches, and at the heart of it is their treasure, that's the root of other pathologies comes from? Well, so that box of games would be my treasure in there. That's kind of why I'm the way I am now of collecting physical. As you can see, I like to have my games with me now. I guess I'm making up for losing all that back 20 years ago. It's funny because I hear stories about people with similar experiences where they lost their entire video game collection, and they have the complete opposite reaction where they're just done with physical at that point. They've sworn it off. They don't want to deal with it anymore. It's almost like a restart for them. And I get that. That makes sense to me. But it's just funny how people have these opposite reactions to adverse things that happen to them. And so some people, they're like, screw it. Like, it doesn't matter, I'm not doing that again. Other people are like, no, I'm gonna rebuild. I want my collection again. And honestly, today, my collection's bigger than ever, but there's still always gonna be that piece of my heart missing that was stolen in that storage shed that day. All right, this next incident is one that I purposefully did, but I still regret doing it, and that is letting my friend's sister borrow my N64 and all my games. This might have been around the same time where I was in college. I had this N64 that I wasn't using anymore. I went to college in 2002, so that can tell you, like, you know, the N64 had just stopped being the console for Nintendo. We were on the GameCube at that point. And I didn't want it, and honestly, it probably would have got stolen in my storage shed, so maybe it was good that I let her borrow it. But now I want it back, you know, and I don't know where these people live anymore, and they probably sold it in a garage sale or something. But my entire N64 collection was there, and I wish I had it now because you have companies like Analog who make these cool retro systems that you can connect to HDMI TVs and play your games in, you know, high resolution. And so if I still had that video game collection, it would make sense to get an Analog N64 to play it. Now, I am also happy that Nintendo supports emulation for N64 games on the Switch, and I really like that they have like a faithful recreation of the controller. So I can still have that experience. I can still play Mario 64 or GoldenEye in a faithful experience and share that with my kids now. So that one doesn't sting as bad. You know, I like having the physical things around, and I like going through old things, and, you know, it's the tactile experience of touching things that brings back memories for me. And so I really miss having those things around. My next video game regret is another self-inflicted one, and that is trading in games. Now, these two games I traded in both sting, and I'll explain why. So the first one, I remember looking through old Nintendo Power magazines, and they were advertising the heck out of this game. They had little scratch and sniff cards in them with like different characters. You could smell what the characters were like smelled like. This was like the gross era of Nintendo. I don't know what to tell you. But I still remember what the slime smells like though, and it's like pickles. But anyways, this game of course is Earthbound. I got the big box of it from Target, and I was super hyped to play it. And I got it. I brought it home. I remember putting it in and being so disappointed with the graphics. I thought this game looked so old. It looked like like the first round of Super Nintendo games. It just didn't look that great. I think this was the same era as Mario RPG and Chrono Trigger and games that were like really starting to like play around with 3D graphics and stuff. And this game just looked like an NES game basically. And so I didn't play it. I boxed it back up, took it back to Target. I think I even ripped the box, but they still took it. But you know, now the game's worth like $1 million. Luckily, you can play it on the Switch now. You know, I wish I had the new in case version of it. And that game was a cult classic, and ever since that game came out, it's only raised its prestige. People love it now. It's viewed as a classic. And so I don't have those fond memories for this game because I was too much of a snob for graphics. Alright, and the next game that I traded in was Final Fantasy Tactics. This game I found out about because it was in the Final Fantasy VII case. On the back of the booklet was a Final Fantasy Tactics advert. And I played the crap out of Final Fantasy VII. It's one of the watershed games for me. Maybe I'll do a video on watershed games in the future and we'll talk about it more. But I wanted more Final Fantasy VII. I wanted more of those graphics and the music and the characters. And so naturally Final Fantasy Tactics was appealing to me. And I remember picking it up and playing it and it just being like nothing I expected it to be. I didn't like the graphics, I didn't like the gameplay. The gameplay was confusing. But you know, I think if I would have stuck with it, I would have eventually figured it out. Maybe I could have got a player's guide or something. But it just didn't win me over. And so I traded it back in. And so now Final Fantasy Tactics is viewed as one of those watershed games for the strategy game genre, where it kind of raised its prominence. And I wasn't there for it, and I wish that I was, and if I could go back in time, I would have kept Final Fantasy Tactics and played it, so today I could be one of the people who loves it, you know. Luckily, we're getting a remake of it this year. I'm really looking forward to it, and I want to rectify my past mistake through that game. So for my next video game regret, it is throwing out my Nintendo Power collection. This was another casualty of college where my parents didn't want these stacks of magazines in their house anymore. Instead of holding on to them or taking them with me or putting me in the storage shed, I just threw them away. I didn't have a complete collection, but I probably had half of the magazines, and they held special memories for me, and I wish that I could go through and, you know, flip through them now. And you know, all the games are on the Switch now, so it'd be cool to use the guides again, or let my kids use them and see them kind of relive some of that magic. Okay, and my next video game regret is my final one, and this one is more of a regret of not having something or not experiencing something versus getting rid of something or having it stolen. And so this was another college casualty, and this is, I missed the generations of the Wii, the DS, and the PlayStation 3. And so those were very foundational consoles for a lot of people who are into gaming now. And I don't have a lot of nostalgia or fond memories for the games on these systems. So for the Wii, major games that I missed out on were Mario Galaxy 1 and 2, The Blob, No More Heroes, Zack and Wiki, and Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn. I never played these games at the time. I've since played Mario Galaxy 1 and 2, and I don't have that nostalgia that a lot of people have for them now. My problem with the Wii was I was never sold on the motion controls, and I was in college, and I was playing Halo, and to me, a Wii with waggle controls was the opposite of appealing. I didn't care at all. The SD graphics were another huge turnoff for me. Like, for some reason, in my mind, the GameCube looks better than the Wii, even though I know the Wii's slightly more powerful, but it just seems like it wasn't. And and the Wii generation lasted for so long too. I never thought it would end. And I was just completely turned off by Nintendo in this era. And I was also turned off by the Nintendo DS, which I was kind of mad at the DS because I feel like they cut the life of the Game Boy Advance short in order to launch this console. Now, in retrospect, I understand their decision because the GameCube and Game Boy Advance weren't really lighting the world on fire like the DS and Wii did. And so ultimately, they made the right decision. But for my, in my opinion back then, I didn't like the direction they were going. And so I voted with my wallet and I didn't get these consoles. Now for DS, I missed out on Zelda Phantom Hourglass, Spirit Tracks, Advance Wars Dual Strike, Pokemon Platinum, and really all the Pokemon games on this system, which are some of the best from what I hear. I haven't played them. And Fire Emblem Shadow Dungeon. Okay, and the last era that I missed out on was the PS3 era. When the PS3 came out, I was a 360 guy. All I really cared about was Halo. I really liked Mass Effect, but PlayStation, I didn't care for the first party stuff. But I know a lot of people who are PlayStation enjoyers now. This is where they got their start. This is where PlayStation, as a studio and a first party studio, really turned it around and started building inroads with people. And so there's a lot of people today who are into PlayStation, and it started here in this era, and I missed out on it. I don't have a lot of nostalgia for this era because I didn't come to it until later. And so some of the games I missed out on were Metal Gear Solid 4, The Last of Us, Little Big Planet, Fat Princess, Resistance, Patapon, the Uncharted series, God of War 3, Killzone, Heavy Rain, and MotorStorm. PlayStation, they were killing it in this era, but as I said, whenever the systems first launched, to me it was clear that the Xbox 360 was the better system. In my opinion, it had the momentum, it had the games I wanted to play, it was cheaper, it wasn't a bulky, huge console. It made sense to get one. But now, looking back, the PlayStation 3 dug itself out of the hole it was in back in the era and ended up coming out on top in that console generation, even though it was neck and neck. I do regret not being there from an early time in the PlayStation 3's life to have that nostalgia for those games and the respect that people now have for it. I missed out on it, and I feel like I'm playing catch up in a lot of ways. And some of these games aren't available on modern consoles. I still have my PS3 hooked up, but it's kind of stinky to go back to, I got Metal Gear Solid 4, but it's hard to want to play that over, Death Stranding 2 or something. So maybe I'll experience these games one day, but again, I won't have that nostalgia for them like a lot of people do. Alright, so that's the end of another episode. So let me know some of your video game regrets. This show is kind of an experiential show for me where I talk about my experiences with games, and I want to hear what your experiences are with games too. Do you have things you regret throwing away or trading in? So let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to hear. All right, so adios until next time.